Hi, I'm Olivia, and today's happy nugget comes from Michelangelo, the masterful Italian artist, most famous for his sculptures, the Pietà and the David, and for his magnificent paintings in the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City. Although Michelangelo considered himself a sculptor first, his genius was such that he used his talents in a myriad of ways, including painting, architecture, and city planning. Beyond that, Michelangelo was a brilliant poet, writing beautiful sonnets that give us a glimpse into his passionate soul, both as an artist and as a man. To look at Michelangelo's work, even in pictures, is to be mesmerized, transfixed, and humbled by the mastery of skill, the breadth of vision, and the holiness of the subject, whether it is a religious piece or a tribute to the male physique. Michelangelo's work is so breathtakingly awe-inspiring and flawless, one would think he had not a care in the world when making it. But in Michelangelo's time, artists and their creations were at the mercy of wealthy and powerful patrons. Michelangelo was plagued with anxieties, political unrest present during the majority of his life, bitter rivalries with other artists, problems with patrons, and basic survival. But none of it mattered when he had a block of marble in front of him. Michelangelo was devoted to his family, often living in the poorest conditions himself, supporting them financially his entire professional life. From a wonderful collection of Michelangelo's poetry and letters by Carolyn Vaughan. In a letter to his brother in 1507, Michelangelo wrote, "Know that I look forward to my early return far more eagerly than ye could possibly do, for I live here in the greatest discomfort, subject to the greatest anxieties, and do nothing but labor day and night. I have undergone and am undergoing so much strain, that if I were obliged to make another figure, I do not believe my life would suffice for it, as the undertaking has been one of enormous difficulty. Had it been entrusted to anyone else, it would have turned out a failure. But I believe the intercessions of somebody or other have assisted me and kept me in health, for all Bologna was of opinion that I should never complete it, both since it was cast and before, when there was no one who believed the casting would ever take place." In 1509, in a letter to another one of his brothers, Michelangelo wrote, "I wish to tell thee that for the last 12 years I have wandered miserably through Italy. I have supported every shame, suffered every hardship, worn out my body with every toil, and risked life itself 1,000 times for the single purpose of assisting my family." Michelangelo Buonarroti was born in 1475 in Caprese, the Republic of Florence, present-day Tuscany. He was the second of 5 sons. Florence was the center of the Italian Renaissance. The Renaissance, meaning rebirth, was a European cultural movement characterized by a renewed interest in classical antiquities, as well as a time of economic revival after the Dark Ages. Michelangelo's father did not approve of a profession in the arts, but nonetheless, when Michelangelo was 13, he began an apprenticeship with Ghirlandaio, the leading fresco painter in Florence. A year later, Michelangelo was invited to live in the Medici Gardens, where Lorenzo de' Medici, the most powerful man in Florence, invited young and talented artists to study a collection of Greek and Roman works. It was there that Michelangelo's love for sculpture flourished. By the time he left the Medici household, Michelangelo was receiving several commissions, moving to Rome to escape political upheaval in Florence. In 1496, he was commissioned to create what would be his first masterpiece, the Pietà, a crucified Christ in the lap of his mother. Michelangelo believed this work would make him famous. It did. He was only 23 years old. A few years later, he won a commission for a civic work of art, which became his famed David. With this, Michelangelo not only cemented his reputation as the greatest living artist of his time, but also as one of the greatest artists of all time. Michelangelo was a master of human anatomy. Through intensive practice, drawings, observation, and the study of cadavers, he perfected his craft. He was deeply religious, and he believed the human body was an expression of the divine, that his talent was given to him by God, and that his calling was to express it. Michelangelo was passionate, and to those he loved, he gave his heart and soul completely. His deep faith in God and his commitment to family fueled his art. Michelangelo's constant advice to his brothers, his nephew, and his apprentices was to be diligent, to make the most of every opportunity, and to strive to do well. Something Michelangelo did every day of his life. To Michelangelo, not giving his best to a work of art would not only be sacrilege, but also a sin. In a letter to the artist and writer Giorgio Vasari in 1555, speaking of his work on St. Peter's, Michelangelo wrote, "I was made to undertake the work upon St. Peter's against my will, and up to the present I have labored at it for 8 years, not only without remuneration, but even to my own hurt and sorrow. Now that the work is really progressing, and there is money in hand, and especially as we are almost ready to begin the dome, I think it would spell disaster to the building if I were to desert it at this juncture. The whole Christian world would cry shame on me, and in the day of judgment this would be accounted to me for a grievous sin that I had committed." 2 years later, in a letter to his brother, Michelangelo said, "I am thus solicitous for the welfare of the building, and have always been so, because there are many who believe, myself among them, that it was God who laid this charge upon me." Michelangelo battled the conflicts of his time, from egocentric, unreliable, corrupt, and fickle patrons, to political unrest, to jealous rivals, and dishonest assistants. There were times anxiety over his family reached its limit, when their ingratitude broke his heart, when their demands taxed his spirit. But he never forsake them. Michelangelo's sense of duty and loyalty to his family was absolute, in spite of how poorly they behaved towards him. To look at Michelangelo's work is to marvel at what a single human being is capable of achieving. Michelangelo created beauty because there was beauty in his soul and compassion in his heart. No matter the problems, no matter the challenges of everyday life, never abandon your family. Always remember that love of family is the greatest masterpiece in the world. And that's today's Happy Nugget. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it, and subscribe. As always, I link below the video anything I recommend. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. See you next time.